Welcome back to IDI's podcast about the road ahead for SAI governance. For those who have listened to us before, and of course also for new listeners, within this podcast we are exploring the opportunities and challenges ahead for Supreme Audit institutions. I'm Irina Spenglevsky from IDI, and I'm very happy to announce that today we will dive into the cutting-edge topic of green tech. So in terms of green tech, I think the first question we can ask ourselves is whether there is a more pressing issue today than the climate change problem. And of course, in addition, you have the accelerated digitalization. So I think when putting those two together, it creates a platform so that we can start exploring how technology can be utilized to actually be a part of the solution and contribute to solving the climate change problem. So I'm very happy that today we have with us João Ricardo Vasconcelos, who has been flying here from Vienna. So thank you very much for coming to Oslo to record this podcast with us. And of course, you will help us to unpack this topic so that we can get a better understanding of what it entails. So João, you are an expert in the World Bank's GovTech initiative, where green tech is also an integral part. Tell us a little bit about yourself and also where your passion from green tech and, of course, specifically greening GovTech comes from.
So hello, thank you Irene and thank you IDI. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. So as mentioned, I'm a senior governance specialist working in the GovTech global unit. I work on very different domains that go from service delivery to civic tech to interoperability to greening GovTech, as you mentioned. And I work specifically on the development of the GovTech global partnership. So the World Bank has been working in this area of digitalizing public sectors for a long time. But it was more recently, namely in the end of 2019, that we launched the GovTech Global Partnership. And this was an acknowledgement of the cross-cutting role of this topic of GovTech for government modernization, let's say like this. And it was also a recognition from the bank side that if you want to transform governments, you need government's expertise, for sure, to be on board, but you also need that non-government stakeholders can be around the table. Meaning the private sector, the academia, that the civil society can contribute to this transformation. So, having in mind this context and in contact with our partners that are now more than 70 around the globe, we've been feeling an increasing demand for the topic of greening GovTech, meaning how you can connect the digital and the green transition underway. From our perspective, it's a super interesting topic. It's a passion topic, like you mentioned, because the connection of these two transitions underway is something that we see as inevitable, and that an institution like the World Bank and with the contribute of all its partners can provide interesting inputs on it.
So for a beginner that is not so aware of the concept, tell us a little bit about what green tech is.
Okay. So, great. Happy to give you a taste of it in simple terms, let's say like this. And for this, we need to distinguish between two dimensions. One thing are technologies or approaches that help to tackle the digital and green transition. Let me give you an example. So you can have information systems that through data help to measure the climate change, or that can help government supporting the risks and resilience of climate change, but they are not necessarily green by themselves, okay? So the output of the systems is green, but the systems themselves are not green by themselves. So this is one dimension that you need to consider in terms of green tech. Then there is a second dimension, that is technologies that are by themselves green. Let me give you another example. So you can develop a cloud computing data center, and if it uses renewable energy, if it's energy efficient, that's a good sign, and that's a green data center that is being developed. The same can be applied for a digital strategy from a government. If this strategy considers the link between green and digital, that's a green digital strategy. So it's promoting this link. So I hope this gives to our audience an idea about our topic.
So it was very interesting to get a bit of better understanding about the two dimensions of green tech. It's clear that technology can be part of the solution, but what you said about the first dimension is that the technology in itself doesn't necessarily have to be green, but that the output can be green. So I think it's good for us to also reflect a little bit about the sort of negative impacts of technology. And then I was wondering, based on your experience, what is the most important negative impacts that you have seen that comes from technology?
On the one hand, there's the question of energy efficiency. Okay, so since technology today is everywhere and is omnipresent in the way that we work, that we live, this kind of technology also requires big processing power. So when we use software, when we use applications, when we use our streaming services, for instance, of course, all this is based on big data centers and cloud computing systems that require big energy to be processed. So energy efficiency is one of the big things underway. Second point, questions of what we call the e-waste or electronic waste. So we know that since technology is evolving more and more, we see increasingly that hardware, meaning our phones, our PCs, easily get outdated based on the developments that are underway. We know after 1 year, 2 years, or a couple of some years, our smartphone from one moment to another has some difficulty to process data and applications that are on the way. So we produce waste and digital waste based on this. So that's 2 points. Let me also provide you some examples on this. So right now, we know that, for instance, cloud computing is one of the approaches that is embraced everywhere, and that brings huge opportunities. But we know also that cloud has now a greater carbon footprint than pre-COVID air travel, according to a study from the Shift project. Meaning, the way that we use our digital systems right now can have and is having in the world, in the planet, a bigger impact than the flights that we take out there. And this is clear. So it's happening right now, and it's good when we use these technologies to also consider it. The UK Government Digital Service, the public sector organization that leads digital government policies in the UK, estimates that the electricity consumption of its hosting providers is equivalent to the CO2 produced by the energy use of 400 homes every year, or the fuel burned by 770 cars on average a year. So this is quite substantial right now, and it shows that technologies, beyond the opportunities that they also bring some big challenges.
Exactly, that was what I was thinking as well, that it's quite substantial numbers that you're presenting. I think it also highlights the importance of bringing this into the debate and the discussions. So it seems to me that the topic of green tech and greening of tech is being more discussed now, and there are more awareness around it. Based on your experience, is this also your view or feeling?
as mentioned, the climate emergency requires that we do this, and these two transitions, meaning the digital and the green, are like fundamental development challenges that we need to embrace. I would say probably to our audience, and that's my view, that some years ago this was understood as a kind of a nice to have, meaning having something that is green and digital was interesting but not mandatory. Right now, what we feel, given the emergency mentioned, is that something that needs really to be embraced more and more.
Okay, so that's a very good sign then in terms of moving forward. So we mentioned earlier that you are a specialist within the World Bank's GovTech initiative. So now let's move a bit into focusing on the public sector. And I think also many of our listeners would find that interesting, assuming that a number of listeners would also be from supreme audit institutions who are auditing the public sector. So based on your experience, can you elaborate a little bit more about what GovTech is and also green tech within the GovTech domain?
So by GovTech or government technologies, we understand an advanced stage of digital government. So let me be more practical on this. Several years ago, we've seen governments progressively digitalizing their public sector, but what they were really doing was making digital what was previously analog. So you had a process that was analog, that was done by paper, and then you start doing it in digital way. So you would have exactly the same forms and the same kind of workflow that you had previously. By GovTech, and when we say an advanced stage of digital government, we understand the capacity of embracing the digital transition as a transformation opportunity. So you include technologies in your processes and in your services with a transformative mindset, making the processes and the services simpler, more citizen-oriented, more convenient to citizens and companies. So that's generally what we speak when we talk about GovTech in our days. The green component of it, let me be precise on the concept on itself. So by greening GovTech, it can be defined as GovTech policies, initiatives, and solutions that embrace environmental considerations by design, maximizing the green benefits and considering the potential negative impacts that technologies can have. And again, like I mentioned previously, it's important to distinguish between green GovTech and GovTech for green. So green GovTech, we mean improving the technologies or the approaches and making them green by default. I gave previously the example of the data center, of a digital government strategy. So making sure that these two dimensions of green and digital are connected. GovTech for green, we mean making sure that the technologies and the processes or approaches associated with them contribute in a certain way to a green agenda. I gave you some examples of applications that can help governments to monitor climate change or to tackle the risks and resilience considering climate emergency. That's a good example of how GovTech can be used for green. Yeah.
In the World Bank guidance note that we'll come back to later in more detail, it says within the note that according to the World Economic Forum, digital solutions can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 15 to 20%. So that is quite substantial. I think you also had some specific country-level examples that can demonstrate that further. So I think we are all looking forward to hear a little bit more about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could mention the different examples here, but the purpose is really to demonstrate the important link between, again, green and digital on this. To our audience, let me bring you an example from the Estonian government. So the government estimates that its e-Estonia system saves the equivalent of 1 working week for the working population. And its digital identity systems save us 2% of GDP per year, with a discernible carbon footprint reduction. So this kind of digital developments developed by the Estonian government have direct impacts on reducing the carbon footprint. A second example coming from Serbia. The Serbian government estimates that by going digital, the country has saved 180 million sheets of paper, almost 18,000 trees, a whole forest, and 76 million liters of water over the past four years. So again, this is trying to demonstrate the benefits that can go from here and showing concrete results about policies that connect the green and the digital again.
Yes, thank you. And I think it's very interesting, and it's always good to hear a bit about the results. And I think it's also inspiring in terms of what you can achieve, which was demonstrated by your examples. So I'm sure our audience will be interested to hear a bit more in terms of how you can concretely approach and embrace green tech. And I think here we will dive a bit more in detail into your excellent guidance note on greening public administration with GovTech, embracing a green digital transition. So Joao, you have been in the lead of developing this guidance note. So can you tell us a bit more about this important work?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for bringing up our greening GovTech guidance note on this. So let me underline that this work was jointly led by my colleague Hunt Lakasia and myself, and bringing together a broad team of World Bank staff members that have been working on this for the last 2.5 years. What we focus right now is, again, on the link between the green and the digital agenda. And we know that governments have been prioritizing these agendas already substantially, but they do it frequently on a siloed way, meaning these are agendas that run kind of parallel tracks, and they are not properly synergized as they should. And having in mind the importance of this transition. So what we tried to achieve with this guidance note was mostly a framework of analysis that can help policymakers and policy implementers to better tackle this issue. So our guidance note focuses on two critical dimensions. The first one is the what. So what is greening GovTech? And here we embrace the topics of how governments are focusing their services and their processes, namely from the back end and the front end of service delivery in this area, and discussing topics like paperless administration, smart and synergized public sector, digital service delivery, and how this can contribute to, let's say, a greener future. Let me give you again an example on this. The moment governments are prioritizing digital service delivery, they are allowing their citizens to access remotely services that previously were only made available face to face. Since they are doing it digitally, there are savings in terms of efficiency. There are savings because the citizens are not commuting to government offices to have those services solved. There are also benefits on the fact that information is being more and more exchanged within the public sector instead of being just stored in a siloed way. So there are positive impacts in terms of the carbon footprint. Another dimension that is also important and addressed in our how-to note, the fact that risk and resilience to climate change is one of the priorities that governments also need to embrace more and more in our days, meaning how to tackle climate emergencies that are coming right now. So we try there to provide some examples and to provide some guidance on this, and hope that it can be useful as a first step for senior government officials and implementers in this area.
So this was very interesting, and thank you for explaining the what dimension of your framework. So you mentioned you also had another dimension, the how. So could you explain a little bit about that as well?
Exactly. The how is focused on how governments can really implement greening of tech policies. And just to give you an example, we focus here on topics like what is the strategy that needs to be embraced? What is the leadership that is needed? Which kind of coordination mechanisms can be used? What is the legal and regulatory framework that governments should embrace? And even what are the policy levers that governments should embrace to tackle these topics? Because we know that sometimes one thing is to have a strategy, other thing is really to implement this strategy. So the how is normally a dimension that is particularly useful in World Bank policies. Just to recap, on this volume 1, we addressed the how and the what, and right now we are about to launch our volume 2 of the Greening of Tech How to Know. So on top of the how and the what, we will present some case studies in this area and also start providing some draft framework on measurements of greening of tech. So stay tuned, please, on this.
Yes, we are looking forward. So in terms of measurement, is that referring to how you can sort of monitor whether you achieve the values intended from your initiatives? Yes. Okay.
Exactly. That's precisely the objective. Right now, there's not a common methodology that can be adopted by governments in this area. So what we do is we start mapping and start putting in places good practices and some guidance about how to measure in an effective way the impact of GovTech policies.
So I think by now, at least I have, and also hopefully our audience have a better understanding of the concept of GovTech and also greening GovTech. So earlier you provided some very nice country examples from Estonia and Serbia. And I know you also have a very interesting examples from Brazil. So we are looking forward to hear a bit more about the Brazil case and the opportunities and also the results. There.
Okay, sure. Happy to share it. And this is also a case study that is highlighted within our volume 2, the one that is upcoming right now. Let me do, of course, the disclaimer that there are not perfect examples that can be followed right now, because this is a quite cutting edge area. So even countries that are super advanced in terms of digital development, they are still tackling and trying to move on to find the best approaches on this. Brazil is a good example in the sense that although the digital and the green agenda are not totally connected yet, there are efforts underway by the government to make this bridge between the two policies more explicit. And to give you some example, one of the priorities of the Brazilian government underway, and that improved a lot during the last years, is the topic of digital service delivery. And the country really jumped in terms of the capacity to provide public services digitally to their citizens. And right now, one of the priorities is also to increasingly measure the impact, the green impact of this digital service delivery that is underway. A second dimension also from the Brazilian case is the e-procurement or electronic procurement rules. So increasingly, green domains are considered when governments are procuring ICT technologies in the public sector. And this is a super important topic and a super important way of making sure that these policies are widespread in the public sector. Third point, the Brazilian government is developing an upcoming digital government strategy. It should be launched soon. So this green dimension is actually one of the topics that might be highlighted there. So there's a good opportunity also for the country to further shine in this area.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And of course, it's not the perfect example, as you said, but still a lot can still be learned. And it's interesting to hear about some concrete experiences. So I think until now we have highlighted several positive examples, and that is always nice. But to get the balanced view, since it's a bit of a new area and there are always some challenges as well that organizations need to be aware of. So based on your experience, what are the key challenges you see when it comes to implementing greening of tech?
Oh, that's a very good point. On this, let me highlight that, curiously or not, it's not really the technological or the digital parts of greening of tech that is the more complicated one. It's actually the non-digital or the non-technological part, meaning the person's part, that ends up being more challenging for the government. That is, how to make sure that you have coherent and sustainable policy approaches across the public sector that can implement this kind of priorities. Is what we call in the World Bank how you can achieve a whole of government approaches, making sure that the different sectors and the different levels of government implement policies in a coherent way. And for this, you need strategy, you need coordination, you need leadership, you need good legal and regulatory frameworks to support it. You need, again, policy levers that make sure that when public agency A is procuring in the public sector, this is aligned with the standards that are defined by the government as a whole. So again, to implement a good digital policy, you need to go beyond the digital aspects of itself.
Yes, thank you. I think that resonates very well with also some aspects on digitalization that goes beyond the green tech part as well. When it comes to providing digital services, it's often not the technology, but managing also the human side of it. And based on your experience, I guess you have to have many people on board and also potentially a bit of a common understanding across sector about the importance of the greening of tech, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's and like we normally say, you need to have the right mindset across the public sector staff in this area. And when I mean mindset, I mean the need to do really a big shift in terms of thinking. The moment that you embrace digitalization, you need also to make sure that it's green by default. So it's not an option. It's really something that you need to embrace as a priority.
So I think until now we have talked a lot about green tech in the context of GovTech and in the context of the public sector. So I think that's very interesting for our listeners overall, and of course specifically if you are from the public sector, but also for supreme audit institutions. So I think now we will change a bit the perspective in a way. Of course, still talk about green tech, but more in the context of supreme audit institutions. So I think many are aware, but still, just to mention briefly that SAIs has a fundamental role in any country as the auditor of public funds. And of course, for SAIs today, digitalization is also very much a discussion within the SAI community and how SAIs can approach digitalization. So I think for SAIs, there are two main dimensions when it comes to digitalizing. And one is, of course, linked to what is happening within the public sector and the government. So when governments integrate technologies and are increasingly becoming digital, of course, that also puts some demands on SAIs as well to audit such systems, which are a bit new. And it also entails that SAIs need to be ready for new audit topics as well, connected to technology and digitalization. Of course, the other dimension is about SAIs using digital technologies for other internal functions as well that goes beyond audit, but to become more efficient and effective internally. So I think based on my current feeling, obviously I could be wrong, but as I mentioned, digitalization is very much being discussed now. But my feeling is that the green tech part is perhaps not so much integrated within those discussions so far. So of course I'm very happy today that we can also bring it into a bit in the SCI context and domain. So, of course, it's also important to be aware of that SAIs are obviously it varies a lot, but many SAIs are struggling a bit with approaching digitalization overall in terms of having the funding to digitalize and also have the human skills, for instance. So, of course, in this context, with many challenges, can you summarize a little bit in terms of why SAIs should prioritize the green digital transition? I think you have touched upon it, but to summarize a little bit.
So if SAIs prioritize digitalization, and I'm sure they do, like you mentioned, they also need to do it in a green digital way, with a green digital mindset. And this, let me try to explain, doesn't mean that everybody on a SAI needs to be an expert in this area. It's about mostly being aware on the importance of the link between these two topics. So if you embrace digitalization, given the climate emergency underway, you need to do it in a green digital approach by default on this. And two perspectives can be considered here. On the one hand, as explained below, a greening GovTech perspective, making sure that the digitalization process of supreme audit institutions is green by default, and green digital is critical nowadays, as we've been discussing during this conversation. On the other hand, GovTech for green, so securing that SAIs can use digital to better audit, having in mind the climate emergency underway. And there are really so many areas where this can be applied. So, yeah, happy to continue the collaboration on this.
To build on what you're saying, we have also talked about that green tech and green in GovTech, it's a bit new, cutting edge topic. So of course, for SAIs, it's also important to be a bit future forward looking as well in terms of current trends as well in this area. I guess one aspect also would be more linked to maybe a bit the individual that we all want to contribute, I think, to a better society in a sense. And I think for SAIs, that is a bit the core of their work. That's what they as organizations try to do. So of course, to also try to have a green digital transformation would also contribute to the feeling that you have a positive impact on society.
Absolutely. On this, let me underline how this can be achieved in a practical way. Not deep diving on it, but just to give you a taste on possibilities of doing it. So, for instance, it could be important to embrace an environmental consideration by default by SAIs, and for this, like explained before, a green digital culture is critical among SAI's leadership and staff members. So you don't need to be an expert. You need to be mostly mindful on the link of these two important topics. Second point, questions of green public procurement. And I'm sure Supreme Audit institutions are quite knowledgeable and quite experienced on this topic. So making sure that legal and regulatory frameworks can reflect this link between green and digital. E-waste management regulations is a third dimension. We've seen it that some countries already embracing it. So I'm pretty sure that the role of Supreme Audit institutions can be fundamental in terms of legal and regulatory frameworks again. And the last point on digital competencies to audit new regulatory frameworks. I'm sure that the experience and the knowledge of supreme audit institutions is quite recognized by the public on this. So I would also say that a bigger role of supreme audit institutions in this area would be much welcome.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question on the last part. I think in your guidance note, and you also mentioned before that to have the appropriate regulatory frameworks is one of the key, how to call it, enablers to succeed with the green digital transformation in the public sector. So I was wondering, in terms of at the global level for governments to develop and implement such policies and regulatory frameworks, do you have a feeling or an overview of how common it has already become since green tech is a bit of a new topic? Yes.
Okay, yeah. When we work with countries all over the world, we can see here and there that this is a topic that is coming up more and more, and there are different experiences underway. But the question is also, I think we're missing, and I mean everybody is missing a kind of a good mapping of how to embrace this topic. So let me say that eventually this could be a good area of collaboration between the World Bank and IDI. So who knows?
Yes.
Let's strengthen our collaboration on this.
Yes, that sounds promising. So looking forward to explore the next step in terms of working together. So let's talk about green digital solutions, which is also part of a green transition, and it would also be relevant for SAIs. So what are your reflections around the possibility or how easy it is these days to be able to find, as you mentioned earlier, for instance, data centers that are green and also green hardware and software?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And since this is an emerging area, we know and we've been observing that different approaches are coming up at national level and at international level on this. But we should also underline that there's not a silver bullet that can be used to tackle this. So probably I'm biased saying this as a World Bank staff member, but I really think that this is an area where multilateral collaboration is needed. So we need countries, meaning governments and non-government stakeholders, to increasingly collaborate in this area to come up with good solutions on this. And again, giving the World Bank world scope, we need to bring on board not only countries that are more ahead in their development process, let me say the global north on board, but also make sure that the global south is in the table and can provide their proper inputs on this. So multilateralism here, I think it's key.
I think in the guide that you developed, you mentioned that the lifetime expectation of IT hardware significantly dependent on the software. If I remember correctly, you also wrote that this with the software aspect is a bit newer, maybe. But I think it would be interesting for our listeners to hear a little bit about the connection and the link between the two.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So as mentioned, and I think it's everybody can feel that. So software is becoming increasingly potent or powerful, let's say, because the fast pace of development in this area is being able to create amazing tools and amazing functionalities out there. What happens frequently is because the software development is happening in such a quick way, the hardware also needs to be updated to follow this kind of development. And let me bring again our audience to the example of our smartphones or our PCs that we all have at home. After some years, because new products, new services are being developed, we feel that our smartphones become increasingly slow or less responsive to new apps, so they get updated and we tend to replace them. And then we create, as mentioned also previously, e-waste that could be avoided. So this capacity to make sure that that software can have a longer life cycle, and making sure that hardware can also follow this kind of life cycle of software, it's something that needs to be underlined. And there are some good developments going on.
So I think now we have tried to make it a little bit more practical for SAIs in terms of how they can approach green tech within their context. And Joao, you mentioned different aspects, such as at least start to think about having a green digital culture and be aware of the green aspect of digitalization. Also about new audit topics coming their way in terms of auditing new regulatory frameworks, and obviously also the procurement part as well. So I think for SAIs as well, in terms of their role, of course, it's important for them to also think about leading by example, which we often say within the SAI community, as being the auditor of the public funds. SAIs should also lead by example, and by that inspire and shape attitudes and behaviors. So I think, of course, also linking to what was said earlier about the SAIs working towards sustainability and a positive impact on society. This is important to at least start thinking about. So I think we can also link this a bit back to for SAIs to have strong governance processes in place as well. Of course, for the GovTech part, you also mentioned the importance of having strategies. I think for SAIs, it would be scaled down, of course, because it's for a single organization. But of course, for SAIs, it's also important to have strong processes in place for governing their digitalization journey. For instance, in terms of planning and setting the strategic direction where the green part can also be reflected. Do you have any additional reflections on this?
Yeah, I think it's great, the points that you underlined, Irina. And let me also try to make the link to the work that the World Bank does as a development organization, and the importance on bringing on board countries that have different levels of development maturity here. The capacity of sharing what works and what doesn't work is absolutely critical when we are embracing these and other topics. So we need to make sure that countries that are earlier in their development journey can benefit from the knowledge of countries that already made that journey and that can share experiences on this, avoiding that the wheel is reinvented over and over again. And I'm sure Supreme Audit institutions can have a critical role here, again, connecting the Global North experience with the Global South experience. And when you do this kind of connection, you're also making sure that leapfrogging can exist for countries in developing contexts. So the moment that you need that you are aware of what went well, but also what went wrong in countries that are more ahead in their journey, you can tread your path accordingly, and making sure that you don't commit the same kind of mistakes, and you are able to leapfrog on that direction. So very promising on this.
Thank you for making that good point. And I like the concept of leapfrogging. So it's still promising, even though you wouldn't necessarily today be at the head of taking this into consideration. But of course, as you mentioned, it very much comes down to communication and sharing knowledge to be able to ensure that all Supreme Audit institutions can move forward with this. So I think now we are moving a bit towards the end of the podcast. Unfortunately, I would have loved to learn a lot more. But of course, it has been very nice to hear all of your reflections and learn from your expertise on this topic. So just a bit towards the end here. in terms of the way forward for green tech, in your expert opinion? How do you see the way forward?
Yeah, and it's been a very good conversation. So let me underline again that I think these two transitions, meaning the green and digital, are becoming indissociable, meaning the climate emergencies require green by default approaches in the digital transformation underway, namely in the public sectors. And we know that the public sectors can have a great role on this. And we know that supreme audit institutions can also play its fundamental part on this process. So challenges and opportunities underway on this.
Yes. So we will stay tuned and very much looking forward to see what the future will bring. So to wrap up, in terms of our audience, what do you believe is the key main takeaways that you would want them to leave with?
Oh, this is raising the bar on this. So let me, as we were able to explore, not always greenly in the digital transition, but not always bad also. So there are challenges and opportunities underway. So let's of course focus on the benefits and also on the risks that come up, and let's find a good path to go on this. Let me also underline, as I already done, the important role of the public sector to green tech, given its weight in the economy as a whole, but also in society shaping views and practices. We all know that, as you mentioned, leading by example is critical here. So this is a big responsibility that the public sector as a whole, and also that supreme audit institutions should take. Last message, at least from my side, the fact that IDI and the World Bank are discussing and prioritizing this topic, it's already a good sign about how we are embracing a cutting edge issues that hopefully will soon become a mainstream topic, and that's good. So, in our view, let's keep reinforcing this collaboration, making sure that, for instance, this podcast and this wonderful conversation that we are having here is just a first step, and that we can continue strengthening our dialogue and our collaboration underway.
Thanks a lot, Joao, for being here and for this excellent conversation. I think for me it has been very enlightening, and I also learned a lot. So thanks to our listeners for tuning in, and I hope it has been a good learning experience and also inspiring for you. So wish you all the best until next time.
Thank you.